Great sunrise, family. Great sunrise. The last video I did get copyrighted, and it's blocked in certain countries, but never mind that. Today I want to get in this discussion, this particular article that was interesting to me. It was kind of interesting to me. So I'm just going to go over this article and talk about it and see if we can get to the meat of it, understanding of it. Okay, here it goes. As vaccine demand slows, doctors shift to micro-targeting vulnerable communities. Pop-up clinics at gas stations and nightclubs are part of the latest effort to reach the unvaccinated. So basically, they're pushing, and you can see here, perception is everything. We have to always remember this. Perception is everything. Okay. On the second, this is an article by Bracy Harris. On the second Saturday in April, Dr. Karen Smith was able to easily find a parking space at Freedom Chapel A&ME Zion Church. The first sign that something was off, Smith, who has a family medicine practice in rural North Carolina town of Radford, had come to the church with enough doses to vaccinate 1,000 people. So first, what's the key word, family? What's the key word in this beginning of this? Before we even get started, they start talking about a church. They start talking about religion. And we know that religion is what? The title of this video, control. Okay? So we know what that is about in the beginning of the article already. The last time she'd held a vaccination event at Freedom Chapel 2 weeks earlier, she said cars were parked 3 deep on the grass and spilled into the sides of the highway. In 2 hours, her team had vaccinated more than 240 people. But on the morning of April the 10th, there were only a few takers in a community where plenty of local residents remained eligible for a shot. Only 14% of residents in Polk County have been fully vaccinated. The rate is the second lowest in the state and trails well behind the nation's average of nearly 31%. Remember, perception is everything, okay? The gap is worrisome in the racially diverse county. 49% white, 36% Black, 14% Latino, and 9% Native American, where many already suffer from poor health and work in industries like the service sector and agriculture that provide little room for social distancing. Smith routinely treats new COVID-19 cases in Polk County as one of the several in North Carolina in orange zone for new cases, one rung below the state's worst category. After vaccinating about 50 people at the church that day, Smith turned to making sure the rest of 100 doses she thought weren't wasted. She called the county sheriff and asked if deputies and incarcerated people had been vaccinated. He told her yes. Then her husband drove her to the town's poultry plant. Where she asked for permission to vaccinate workers. She received the go-ahead, but once again, she walked away with a surplus. A few workers stopped her team in the parking lot and rolled up their sleeves there. Now 29 doses were left. One of her staff members joked they should go to a convenience store. A short drive later, she walked into a gas station and asked the manager and employees if they were interested in getting the shots. For many communities, the next leg of the country's vaccination push could look increasingly like this. As providers shift their focus from mass vaccination sites to micro-targeting, said Hemi to Warson, a visiting senior policy fellow with the Duke Margolis Center for Health Policy, who has closely tracked equity efforts with the nation's vaccination rollout. You have to think, let's look geographically. Where do we have low vaccination rates? She said, and then drill down within that. Who are the people? And what's going to resonate with them? Well, first of all, who are the people? Most of them are people who are Black. Most of them are Black people who are psychologically damaged, disenfranchised, and don't know a lick of anything about themselves, do not have resources, are not provided with any sort of help outside of that benefit those who would come and help to take advantage of their situation, basically. So these are the people, okay? These are the people who are poorly educated in a system that cannot educate them. Otherwise, that might range from a smaller site near a community hub where people can easily walk up to receive a shot, or a van bringing vaccination to an apartment complex. Such approaches are already being deployed in cities like Baltimore, which recently launched a pop-up clinic. Excuse me, family. I got a runny nose today. Okay. That might range from a smaller site near a community hub where people can easily walk up to receive a shot, or a van bringing vaccinations to an apartment complex. Such approaches are already being deployed in cities like Baltimore. Which recently launched a pop-up clinic in community college. Well, majority of the colleges are going to force you to either do or die, either sink or swim, either take this damn shot or don't get no education. I would say let them have their education. Self-taught, self-learned. Um, Sometimes it's the funnest and it's the best. Do you want a job working for the slave masters and building up their corporations, their businesses? That's up to you. That's up to you. That's your free will. It's your free will. You gotta weigh your benefits from your, what are you really benefiting? Are you really benefiting any independence, any freedom? Or are you gonna go to their schools, become in debt, and just wait on somebody to decide whether they're going to give you $10,000 or $50,000, or you probably won't even get nothing, no assistance. It's just, you have to, and then is the education worth it? You know, hindsight, looking back, you know, if I knew all these things, my decisions would have been way different. If I seen the world for what it really is. And, you know, the idea is to use door knocking campaigns. Yeah, come knock on my door. I got a door that's ready to swing one way. And social media advertisements to spread the word in nearby neighborhoods before each clinic. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana, officials are planning an outreach event outside a popular nightclub. In Chicago, youth ambassadors would increase the peace. An anti-violence initiative have also started sharing information about the shots. The shift could be critical as more states and local health officials confront thinning demand for the vaccinations. Dozens of counties where vaccination rates sit in the low double digits, like Hoke, also have a high social vulnerability index from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That's an indicator that some of the communities facing greater risk of being devastated by the pandemic have the scariest defense. Okay. It says vaccination rate is going to be slower, trickle amid hesitancy, doctor says. Even with the pandemic, disproportionate impact on communities of color now, Black people and Hispanic people are underrepresented in most states. Vaccination totals, according to an analyst from the Kaiser Family Foundation, lack of access to transportation or to internet can make it impractical to obtain a shot. Okay, so this is not a racist country, but yet Black people on the ground like dirt. Okay, mind you, if this wasn't a racist country, everybody's supposed to be on an equal. And you're supposed to be, everybody's supposed to be a concern for these shots. But I see the focus is mostly on Black people. And this is not a racist country, though. But yeah, you're many times I hear the same old scenario that Black people are disproportionately supported in the health field, disproportionately are more poor. I'm hearing all this stuff, but yet this country is founded on slavery of Black people, but yet it's disproportionate and disfranchising Black people and Black people on the bottom. But yet this is not, we have a vice president, we have somebody, member of Congress, who is talking about this is not a racist country. That is very disturbing. So that we have two Black people, one person that is considered black, but she is not black. You come from a white woman, you're white. You're what that woman produced. A white woman cannot produce black children. She's going to produce what is like her. So, in no shape or form is Kamala a black woman. That's just the facts of science. No. People can argue against science, but science is, you're not going to change that. You're going to be beaten against a brick wall, because that's going to win. When you look at the genetics and break it down, it's not about dominance. It's about where you come from. And that's the world Kamala comes from, a white woman. So, a Caucasian woman. So, she would know whether it's a racist country because she is knee deep in her marriage to a white man. Her mom's a white woman, and that's how she was raised. She just grew up like that. So her family is Caucasian, basically. That's what the route she had the choice, and that's where she chose. And that's where she's at. So she does not relate. And I hear too many times people talk about black, but she's not our black vice president, female vice president, no, by no means. She's not going to give you that. And she doesn't, that's her right. That's her born right to not give us that. But, unfortunately, it creates a situation to where she can benefit from using both. Unfortunately, she can benefit in harming the black community by saying that she's black sometimes when she feels like it. But for the most part, she does not represent the black woman by no means, because she doesn't come from a black woman. And that needs to be clarified, because that is very critical in this complex world that we live in. So they say the lack of access to transportation. Well, all of this is an effect from a cause. So it's by no means the people's fault that disenfranchisement continued up to 2021. So like I said, America has never not been a racist country. And for some people to sit up and say that it's not a racist country is deeply disturbing. And while surveys from the foundation show a decline in vaccine hesitancy among both groups, distrust fueled by past and current mistreatment in healthcare can remain deterrent. For communities with history of mistrusting medical establishment, partnerships between vaccine providers and grassroots groups that have earned trust is critical, said Dr. Herlene Gale, who co-chaired a committee for the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine dedicated to advising officials on how to equitably distribute doses. But what I don't hear is how to educate these people on who they are, what they are, and why they are. How to empower them. I don't hear that in this article so far. I hear, let's use Black doctors, Black scientists to get them to trust the product of white society. It is very important that healthcare providers think about how they can team up with the organization that really understand communities and community needs, she said. In Washington, D.C., several healthcare providers worked together to bring doses to the Southeast Tennis and Learning Center located in Ward 8, which has been hit hard by the pandemic. Only 12% of the residents in the ward have been fully vaccinated, the lowest percentage in the city. The efforts were launched after the city's former lady, Cora Masters Berry, expressed concerns about disparities in vaccination rates. Ward 8 has the second highest concentration of Black residents in the city. Poor health outcomes are endemic. So what about the white communities? That's all I'm going to say. What about the white communities? Okay. Dr. Jahan L. I think it's very convenient that the Democrats are in office and that Black people are the focus of this primarily for the reasons that civil rights have always said, enfranchisement. So why are we in the disfranchisement? Why do we need civil rights? Why do we need to be? Why do we need all these things if America is not a racist country? Said some patients have to take 3 buses to travel to appointments. It's just one illustration of how undeserved this community is. Okay, all of a sudden COVID strikes and we're all of a sudden underserved and it's been paid attention to, but nothing has still been done about it. I can walk to the pharmacy and trip over the Safeway and Trader Joe's. Bohemi, who also serves on the steering committee for the Black Coalition Against COVID, said of her neighborhood in Ward 3, which is in a different and a more well-resourced part of Washington. There's only one full-service grocery store in Ward 8. On April the 3rd, a vaccination event at the Recreation Center was made exclusive to residents of Ward 8. Free Uber rides were provided for those who needed transportation. Almost 900 people were vaccinated, and nearly 200 of them were walk-ins who hadn't registered. Organizers who offered food boxes and referrals to aid organizations and information about affordable preventive health care. A DJ specializing in go-go, a funk genre that originated in the city, blared tracks to make the affair upbeat. Okay. One woman told El Bayama me, who was enjoying herself so much that she didn't want to leave. While such events may not bring large numbers as quickly as mass drive-thrus do, they can be effective tool in reaching those who otherwise might go unprotected. Smith in North Carolina said that as she sat at a table in a convenience store a couple weeks ago, it was evident that plenty of people she vaccinated there wouldn't have made their way to Freedom Chapel. Some didn't visit doctors regularly. Others cited religious objections or told her they worried the vaccine would affect their ability to have children, a false claim that continues to proliferate on social media. That day, Smith said, made it that day, Smith said, made it clear that the typical approach did not work. Of the 29 doses her team used at the gas station, 25 went on men who identified as Black or Latino. For Smith, it was an indicator or who's been left behind. And as you see, now, we missed them, she said. For us to get 25, we were not doing it right. One person told her he didn't have a primary care provider. She gave him a card and started thinking about the next time she could return. Now, mind you, a lot of these people may not have health benefits. So if something does go wrong, she's not going to, the one that gave them the shot is not going to be able to do anything for them. And no one's held accountable when they do give you these shots and something does go horribly wrong with you. Okay, she gave him a card and started thinking about the next time she could return for his next shot, right? A mobile home park sits behind the convenience store, and it would be easy for residents to walk up and get vaccinated. Easier still would be bringing the doses there. If management allows it, her team is working to see if that would be possible. Now the time's to come out of the physical sterile healthcare way of thinking, she said. Okay. So now let's take a look at Biden's speech. Okay. Hopefully I don't get a copyright on that. What do y'all think? I might just get a copyright on that. Hopefully I don't. Okay. Okay. Hopefully it'll work. I'm having some
coverage begins now. This is an ABC News special. The president and his hope of an America returning to normal.
If you're fully vaccinated, you're outdoors and not in a big crowd, you no longer need to wear a mask.
Thanking Americans for getting us here. And moments from now, President Joe Biden lays out his hopes for the future.
Restoring trust between law enforcement and the community they are sworn to serve and protect. Racism has long torn us apart. We have so many people dying every single day from gun violence in America. The vast majority of people crossing the border are being sent back. We desperately need a unified national response to the climate crisis. America is back. Diplomacy is back.
Tonight, how will his message play to a divided Congress, to a polarized America? Now reporting, David Muir. And good evening from ABC News headquarters in New York. Just moments from now, President Biden will address Congress and the American people on the eve of his first 100 days in office. Let's look live now at the House chamber. The president set to arrive moments from now. Members of Congress already arriving. We know President Biden entered office at a time of historic challenge in our country. This once-in-a-century pandemic. 574,000 lives now lost to the virus. Senator Sanders there. Millions of jobs lost. And the president's address tonight.
So we first heard that he says racism, he admit racism has been too long in this country, right? But yet he himself said it wasn't a racist country. He was one of the people that, of course, we expect that from him, but
I will reflect the time.
Possibilities.
Today is Vice President Kamala Harris, the Speaker of the House, and he's expected to make mention of this history. How could you not? With it on full display right there behind him. And a copy of the speech.
Okay.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor to present to you the President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good to be back. Mitch and Chuck will understand it's good to be almost home. Down the hall. Anyway, thank you all. Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President. No president has ever said those words from this podium. No president's ever said those words. And it's about time. First Lady and her husband. Second Gentleman, Chief Justice, members of the United States Congress and the Cabinet, distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. While the setting tonight is familiar, this gathering is just a little bit different. Reminder of the extraordinary times we're in. Throughout our history, presidents have come to this chamber to speak to Congress, to the nation, and to the world, to declare war, to celebrate peace, to announce new plans and possibilities. Tonight, I come to talk about crisis and opportunity, about rebuilding the nation, revitalizing our democracy, and winning the future for America. I stand here tonight, one day shy of the 100th day of my administration. 100 days since I took the oath of office and lifted my hand off our family Bible and inherited a nation we all did that was in crisis. The worst pandemic in a century. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Now, after just 100 days, I can report to the nation, America is on the move again. Peril into possibility, crisis to opportunity, setbacks into strength. We all know life can knock us down, but in America, we never, ever, ever stay down. Americans always get up. Today, that's what we're doing. America's rising anew, choosing hope over fear, truth over lies, and light over darkness. After 100 days of rescue and renewal, America is ready for a takeoff, in my view. We're working again, dreaming again, discovering again, and leading the world again. We have shown each other and the world that there's no quit in America, none. 100 days ago, America's house was on fire. We had to act. And thanks to the extraordinary leadership of Speaker Pelosi, Majority Leader Schumer, and the overwhelming support of the American people, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, we did act. Together we passed the American Rescue Plan, one of the most consequential rescue packages in American history. We're already seeing the results. We're already seeing the results. After I promised we'd get 100 million COVID-19 vaccine shots into people's arms in 100 days, we will have provided over 220 million COVID shots in those 100 days. Thanks to all the help of all of you. We're marshaling with your help.
Okay, so that's so far is what they think is beneficial to Black people is these shots. And it's free, and it is supposed to be beneficial to Black people. Let's see what else they talk about for Black people who voted in this man.
One of the worst pandemics in history has been one of the greatest. Public investment in infrastructure has literally transformed America, our attitudes as well as our opportunities. The Transcontinental Railroad, the interstate highways, united two oceans and brought a totally new age of progress to the United States of America. Universal public schools and college aid opened wide the doors of opportunity. Scientific breakthroughs took us to the moon. Now we're on Mars, discovering vaccines, gave us the internet, and so much more. These are investments we made together as one country, and investments that only the government was in a position to make. Time and again, they propel us into the future. That's why I propose the American Jobs Plan, a once-in-a-generation investment in America itself. This is the largest jobs plan since World War II. Creates jobs to upgrade our transportation infrastructure. Jobs modernizing our roads, bridges, highways. Jobs building ports and airports, rail corridors, transit lines. It's clean water. And today, up to 10 million homes in America and more than 400,000 schools and child care centers have pipes with lead in them, including drinking water. A clear and present danger to our children's health. American Jobs Plan creates jobs replacing 100% of the nation's lead pipes and service lines, so every American can drink clean water. In the process, we will create thousands and thousands of good-paying jobs. It creates jobs connecting every American with high-speed internet, including 35% of the rural America that still doesn't have it. It's going to help our kids and our businesses succeed in the 21st century economy. And I'm asking the Vice President to lead this effort, if she would, because I know it'll get done. Creates jobs building a modern power grid. Our grids are vulnerable to storms, hacks, catastrophic failures with tragic results, as we saw in Texas and elsewhere during the winter storms. The American Jobs Plan will create jobs that lay thousands of miles of transmission lines needed to build a resilient and fully clean grid. We can do that. Look, the American Jobs Plan will help millions of people get back to their jobs and back to their careers. 2 million women have dropped out of the workforce during this pandemic. 2 million. And too often because they couldn't get the care they needed to care for their child or care for an elderly parent who needs help. 800,000 families are on the Medicare waiting list right now to get home care for their aging parent or loved one with disability. If you think it's not important, check out in your own district, Democrat or Republican. Democrat or Republican voters. Their great concern, almost as much as their children, is taking care of an elderly loved one who can't be left alone. Medicaid contemplated it, but this plan is going to help those families and create jobs for our caregivers with better wages and better benefits, continuing a cycle of growth. For too long, we've failed to use the most important word when it comes to meeting the climate crisis: jobs. 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 For me, when I think climate change, I think jobs. American jobs. So that's why I'm calling on Congress to pass Protect the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, and send it to my desk so we can support the right to unionize. And by the way, while you're thinking about sending things to my desk, let's raise the minimum wage to $15. No one working 40 hours a week, no one working 40 hours a week should live below the poverty line. We need to ensure greater equity and opportunity for women. And while we're doing this, let's get the Paycheck Fairness Act to my desk as well. Equal pay. It's been much too long. And if you wonder whether it's too long, look behind me. And finally,
The most disenfranchised people has been Black Americans. And that's because back in the 70s, in the 60s and the 70s, Black men couldn't get jobs, good paying jobs to take care of their families. This caused a lot of rifts in how Black women were left to fend for themselves with children. Many had to rely on social services for assistance. That can never be undone. There's no way to go back in the past to undo that. So those situations that would cause a rift in the Black family. Which has caused a great effect on today. Especially when in the 90s, when in the 80s, drugs were put in our communities. And we saw horrific effects from high crime, drug-infested communities in the 90s, and more gang violence increased. We were destroyed, we were broken down. So, who is he talking to in this speech?
American Jobs Plan will be the biggest increase in non-defense research and development on record. We'll see more technological change, and some of you know more about this than I do. We'll see more technological change in the next 10 years than we saw in the last 50. That's how rapidly artificial intelligence and so much more is changing. And we're falling behind the competition with the rest of the world. Decades ago, we used to invest 2% of our gross domestic product in America, 2% of our gross domestic product in research and development. Today, Mr. Secretary, that's less than 1%. China and other countries are closing in fast. We have to develop and dominate the products and technologies of the future. Advanced batteries, biotechnology, computer chips, clean energy. The Secretary of Defense can tell you, and those of you who work in national security issues know, the Defense Department has an agency called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. The people who set up before I came here, and that's been a long time ago, to develop breakthroughs that enhance our national security. That's their only job. And it's a semi-separate agency. It's under the Defense Department. It's led to everything from the discovery of the internet to GPS and so much more that's enhanced our security. The National Institute of Health, the NIH, I believe, should create a similar advanced research projects agency for health. And here's what it would do. It would have a singular purpose: to develop breakthroughs to prevent, detect, and treat diseases like Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cancer. I'll still never forget when we passed the cancer proposal in the last year as vice president. Almost $9 million going to NIH. And they've excused the point of personal privilege. I'll never forget you standing, Mitch, and saying, "Name it after my deceased son." It meant a lot. But so many of us. But the rest of the world is not waiting for us. I just want to be clear. From my perspective, doing nothing is not an option, which addresses four of the biggest challenges facing American families and in turn America. First is access to good education. When this nation made 12 years of public education universal in the last century, it made us the best educated, best prepared nation in the world. It's, I believe, the overwhelming reason that propelled us.
That is so untrue. There's other countries that are more educated, but we have the ability of more information in this country. It's information is free and open. I can give him that much. But as far as getting educated, self-education has always been the best. Being educated is kind of, it goes under, the title of this video, control.
To where we got in the 20th century. But the world's caught up or catching up. They're not waiting. I would say parenthetically, if we were sitting down, we set a bipartisan committee together and said, okay, we're going to decide what we do in terms of government providing for free education. I wonder whether we'd think, as we did in the 20th century, that 12 years is enough in the 21st century. I doubt it. 12 years is no longer enough today to compete with the rest of the world in the 21st century. That's why my American Families Plan guarantees 4 additional years of public education for every person in America, starting as early as we can. The great universities in this country have conducted studies of the last 10 years. It shows that adding 2 years of universal high-quality preschool for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old, no matter what background they come from, puts them in the position to be able to compete all the way through 12 years. It increases exponentially their prospect of graduating and going on beyond graduation. The research shows when a young child goes to school, not daycare, they're far more likely to graduate from high school and go to college or something after high school. When you add 2 years of free community college on top of that, you begin to change the dynamic. We can do that. And we'll increase Pell Grants and invest in historical Black colleges for millions of Americans. In March, we expanded tax credit for every child in a family, up to $3,000 per child if they're under 6 years of age. Over 6 years of age, and $3,600 for children over 6 years of age. With 2 parents, 2 kids, that's $7,200 in the pockets to help take care of your family. And that will help more than 65 million children and help cut child care poverty in half. And we can afford it. Our power to do it, let's do it now. Let's lower deductibles for working families on the Affordable Care Act. And let's lower prescription drug costs. We know how to do this. The last president had that as an objective. We all know how outrageously expensive drugs are in America. In fact, we pay the highest prescription drug prices of anywhere in the world. And they benefit from tax loopholes and deductions for offshoring jobs and shifting profits overseas. It's not right. We're going to reform corporate taxes so they pay their fair share and help pay for the public investments their businesses will benefit from as well.
So he's talking about the corporations.
In fact, the pay gap between CEOs and their workers is now among the largest in history. According to one study, CEOs make 320 times what the average worker in their corporation makes. Used to be below 100. The pandemic has only made things worse. 20 million Americans lost their job in the pandemic, working and middle-class Americans. At the same time, roughly 650 billionaires in America saw their net worth increase by more than $1 trillion in the same exact European Union. I said I'd do it in my first 100 days. I want to be very blunt about it. I had my attempt was to make sure that the world could see there was a consensus, that we are at an inflection point in history. The consensus is if we act to save the planet, we can create millions of jobs and economic growth and opportunity to raise the standard of living almost everyone around the world. If you watched any of it and you were all busy, I'm sure you didn't have much time. That's what virtually every nation said, even the ones that aren't doing it. To Russia's interference in our elections and the cyber attacks on our government and our business. Those of you in the intelligence committees, the foreign relations committee, defense committees, you know well, we have to remain vigilant against the threats to the United States wherever they come from. We've all seen the knee of injustice on the neck of Black Americans. Now's our opportunity to make some real progress. The vast majority of men and women wearing a uniform and a badge serve our communities, and they serve them honorably. I know them. I know they want. I know they want to help meet this moment as well. My fellow Americans, we have to come together to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve, to root out systemic racism in our criminal justice system, and to enact police reform in George Floyd's name that passed the House already. I know Republicans have their own ideas and are engaged in very productive discussions with Democrats in the Senate. We need to work together to find a consensus. But let's get it done next month, by the first anniversary of George Floyd's death. The country supports this reform, and Congress should act. We have a giant opportunity to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice, real justice. And with the plans outlined tonight, we have a real chance to root out systemic racism that plagues America and American lives in other ways. A chance to deliver real equity, good jobs, good schools, affordable housing, clean air, clean water, being able to generate wealth and pass it down to generations because you have an access to purchase a house. Real opportunities in the lives of more Americans, Black, white, Latino, Asian Americans, Native Americans. Look, I also want to thank the United States Senate for voting 94-1 to pass the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to protect Asian American and Pacific Islanders. We acted decisively. You can see on television the viciousness of the hate.
So they immediately were able to pass the Asian hate crime bill and hand over monetary benefits to them for the pandemic, but yet in his own speech he talks about the systematic racism that Blacks endured, but yet all we get is an HR 40. Let's do a study to talk about giving over some kind of retribution or reparation or repair to a 400-year disease that was caused within a people intently. And the effects are well seen today. And the people are having a hard time getting themselves together because they don't have the information, the knowledge of self. If you don't have no knowledge of yourself, how can, if in the world has caused you to hate yourself, how can you move forward, which is what you've been handed? No matter what people say, no matter what I say, no matter what we do, it's hard to change. It's hard to work with. The damage has been done.
The 8 victims of the mass shooting in Georgia, when 10 more lives were taken in the mass shooting in Colorado. And in the week in between those two events, 250 other Americans were shot dead in the streets of America. 250 shot dead. I know how hard it is to make progress on this issue. In the 90s, we passed universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines that hold 100 rounds that can be fired off in seconds. We beat the enemy.
So basically, now that everyone has what they wanted, it's like from my point of view, it's like we have what we wanted all along. Now we have this nuisance on the side that we have to deal with. After we've utilized what we needed for our benefits and our benefit.
They'll tell you there's no possible justification for having 100 rounds in a weapon. What do you think, deer wearing Kevlar vests? They'll tell you that there are too many people today who are able to buy a gun, but shouldn't be able to buy a gun. These kinds of reasonable reforms have overwhelming support. It should be celebrated. Instead, it's being attacked. Congress should pass H.R. 1 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and send it to my desk right away. The country supports it, and Congress should act now. Look,
Voting really doesn't do us any good because we're still dealing with two heads that are of the same body. And we're dealing with emotions. And we're stuck in that control of our emotions, control over everything about ourselves. So something has to be different. Something has to change within us to see that it's not necessarily, our help is definitely not going to come from where we think it's going to come from. And we hope it's going to come from.
Conclusion, as we gather here tonight, the image of a violent mob assaulting this Capitol, desecrating our democracy. If we do that, we will meet the center challenge of the age by proving that democracy is durable and strong. Autocrats will not win the future.
He then turned to infrastructure and
new resolve to position us to win the competition of the 21st century. On our way to a union more perfect, more prosperous, and more just. As one people, one nation, and one America. Folks, as I told every world leader I've ever met with over the years, it's never, ever, ever been a good bet to bet against America, and it still isn't. We're the United States of America. There's not a single thing, nothing beyond our capacity. We can do whatever we set our minds to if we do it together. So let's begin to get together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you for your patience.
today with President Biden, his first address to a joint session of Congress, giving an elbow bump to the Speaker.
Within the soul. Peace and love. Till next time.